Even more haunting are the archaeological clues. Viking era skeletons discovered in England and Scandinavia show signs of violence consistent with the descriptions. Deep cuts along the back, ribs separated from the spine, and marks suggesting dismemberment with extraordinary precision. These findings, while rare, hint that the blood eagle may not have been invention but practice, a ritual performed rarely, but remembered vividly enough to echo through song and saga. The sagas themselves treat it with a strange reverence. The blood eagle is never described as mere cruelty. It is always an act of vengeance sanctified by faith. The victim's body becomes an offering to Odin, who hung himself upon the world tree and bled for wisdom. In imitating the god's sacrifice, the Vikings believed they honored him. The eagle, Odin's symbol, was carved into flesh as both punishment and prayer. Whether literal or symbolic, the power of the blood eagle lay in its meaning. It was not a method of execution, it was a statement. To perform it was to declare total domination, to make the body of an enemy a message to the gods and men alike. The fact that such an act could be imagined, let alone described in such detail, reveals something essential about the Viking mind, that honor was worth more than mercy, that vengeance was divine, and that even death could be turned into ritual. For centuries, scholars tried to strip the blood eagle of reality, to bury it under skepticism. But the bones unearthed and the words of the sagas whisper the same truth. Perhaps it was not myth after all. Perhaps in the flicker of torchlight and the roar of the northern wind, the Vikings truly did carve their vengeance into the flesh of their enemies and offered their agony to the gods who watched from above. For centuries, the blood eagle hovered between history and myth, a story so gruesome that even those who believed in Viking ferocity dismissed it as legend. According to the Old Norse sagas, the ritual was an execution so cruel, so ritualized, that it seemed beyond the bounds of possibility. It was said that the ribs of the victim were severed from the spine and pulled outward to resemble wings. The lungs laid across them like feathers in a grotesque parody of flight to the Vikings. It was an offering to Odin, the Allfather who demanded blood for honor. To later generations, it was proof of their savagery. But as the centuries passed, scholars began to look again, and the line between myth and reality began to blur. The blood eagle appears in several of the Icelandic sagas, Orkneyinga saga, Stora Eyrbyggja saga, and the tale of Ragnar's sons. Each tells of vengeance and sacrifice, of men carved open as punishment for betrayal or the murder of kin. The most famous account describes Ivar the Boneless, son of Ragnar Lothbrok, performing the ritual on King Fela of Northumbria in the 9th century. Fela had captured Ragnar and thrown him into a pit of serpents, leaving him to die. When Ivar returned with his army, he vowed a vengeance so complete it would echo through eternity. Fela, the story says, was seized after battle, bound, and subjected to the blood eagle. His body turned into an offering to Odin, as his soul fled screaming to the gods. For generations, historians dismissed these stories as symbolic rather than literal. The sagas were written centuries after the events they describe, mixing history with poetry, fact with myth. The blood eagle, they argued, was a metaphor, a way of saying that an enemy was punished horribly or sacrificed in Odin's name. After all, could such a thing even be done? Could ribs be cut and spread like wings without the victim dying instantly? Could lungs be drawn outward while the heart still beat? The details seemed impossible, but in recent decades, forensic scientists and archaeologists have begun to re-examine the old accounts with a new eye. Anatomists studying the saga's descriptions realized that the procedure, while horrifying, was anatomically possible. If the ribs were severed from the spine and pulled outward carefully, they could indeed create a wing. Like shape, the lungs, when exposed, would inflate as the dying victim gasped for air, producing the illusion of movement. a grotesque flutter that could have inspired the legend of the eagle. It would be slow, excruciating, and deliberate, the kind of act only possible in a ritualized context, performed for spectacle, not efficiency. For generations, scholars dismissed the blood eagle as poetic invention, a literary exaggeration born from the violent imagination of Viking storytellers. It seemed too elaborate, too cruel, too anatomically implausible to be real. But as archaeology, forensics, and linguistic study advanced, the story began to change. Piece by piece, evidence emerged from both the sagas and the soil. Evidence suggesting that the blood eagle might not have been myth at all, but a ritual grounded in both religious symbolism and physical reality. What once sounded like legend now reads like history written in bone. The most detailed descriptions of the blood eagle appear in the Icelandic sagas, particularly Orkney Inga Saga and the Tale of Ragnar's Sons. These were written centuries after the events they recount, yet they preserve strikingly consistent details. The victim, usually a captured enemy or traitor, was bound face down. The ribs were cut away from the spine, pulled outward to form wings, and the lungs laid upon them so that they fluttered like an eagle's. The execution was said to be offered to Odin, the god of war and wisdom, to modern readers. The account sounds impossible, but Viking poets rarely invented details without reason. The sagas were not histories in the modern sense, but neither were they pure fiction. They preserved oral traditions that had passed from skalds, court poets, to scribes across centuries. Their consistency matters. When independent sources across Scandinavia repeat the same ritual pattern, using the same terminology, phrases like cutting the blood eagle on his back or marking the eagle with swords, it suggests a shared cultural memory. These were not metaphors randomly chosen. They described something people believed and possibly witnessed. In 2021, a team of scholars from the University of Iceland and Kiel University published a forensic reanalysis of the blood eagle, combining textual study with anatomical science. Their findings startled historians. They concluded that, gruesome as it sounds, the ritual was physically possible. Using knowledge of human anatomy and Viking age weapons, they demonstrated how a skilled warrior or ritual specialist could sever the ribs along the spine, fold them outward, and expose the lungs without immediate death. The victim would die in agony, but not instantly. In the cold precision of Viking craftsmanship, the impossible had become horrifyingly plausible. Archaeology, too, began to whisper its confirmations. Viking age skeletons discovered in England and Scandinavia bear marks, consistent with the ritual deep incisions along the back, ribs separated cleanly from the vertebrae, and evidence of careful, deliberate cutting rather than chaotic butchery. One skeleton found near Repton, in what was once the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia, showed trauma that matched the saga descriptions. A body opened across the back. The ribs flared outward, likely post-mortem, but carried out with methodical intent. To the archaeologists, it looked less like a battlefield wound and more like a statement. Even the language of the sagas contains clues that suggest something more than metaphor. The Old Norse term, Orfeista fey orn fey baki, to carve the eagle on the back, appears in contexts that describe vengeance killings. The word fein, meaning eagle, often stood for Odin's sacred bird, the devourer of the slain. The act of carving the eagle may have begun as a symbolic mutilation, a ritual marking of a defeated foe dedicated to the gods. Over time, it may have evolved or been exaggerated into the full-body disembowelment described in later sagas. But symbolism does not exclude physicality. The Vikings blurred the line between ritual and act, faith and flesh. Skeptics still argue that the blood eagle was literary invention, a metaphor for dishonor rather than a literal practice. Yet the convergence of textual detail, Anatomical plausibility and archaeological evidence makes that position harder to defend. The Vikings were perfectly capable of extraordinary brutality. Their raids, sacrifices, and punishments all reflected a worldview in which pain could be holy and death could be art. The Blood Eagle fits that world too neatly to be pure fiction. What makes this evidence haunting is not just that it supports the ritual's reality, but that it confirms the mindset behind it. The Blood Eagle was not wanton cruelty. It was devotion through violence, vengeance sanctified by religion. It was both punishment and prayer, a declaration that the gods still watched, and that the code of honor demanded more than mere death. The bones unearthed from Viking graves and battlefields tell us what the sagas first sang. The Blood Eagle may not have been legend, but memory. And like all memories forged in pain, it endured because it told a truth about the people who performed it, one they wanted the world to remember. To modern eyes, the Blood Eagle seems like madness, a nightmare of barbaric cruelty too grotesque to be rational. But to the Vikings who may have performed it, it was not insanity, it was order. Every cut, every breath, every drop of blood spilled in the ritual carried meaning. The Blood Eagle was not the act of a sadist, but the fulfillment of vengeance. It was justice, religion, and honor fused into one. To the Norse mind, vengeance was not a crime, it was a duty. In Viking society, the concept of drengskapur, manly virtue, was defined by courage, loyalty, and the obligation to avenge wrongs. To let an enemy go unpunished was to invite shame upon oneself and one's kin. The sagas speak often of men who avenged their fathers or brothers, not as murderers but as heroes. Blood demanded blood. But vengeance had rules. It had to be measured, meaningful, and sanctified by faith. The Blood Eagle represented the ultimate expression of that code, a punishment so absolute that it satisfied both earthly honor and divine justice. The most famous tale of the Blood Eagle, recorded in the tale of Ragnar's sons, centers on this moral logic. When King Fela of Northumbria captured the legendary Viking Ragnar Lothbrok and condemned him to die in a pit of serpents, he did more than kill a man. He violated sacred bonds of hospitality and kinship. Ragnar's death was not just a murder. It was an insult to his sons and to Odin himself. In Norse belief, the dishonor of a slain kinsman demanded retribution that matched or surpassed the original wrong. When Ragnar's son, Ivar the Boneless, captured Fela years later, his vengeance had to be monumental. The Blood Eagle was not merely execution, it was cosmic balance restored. The sagas describe Ivar's vengeance in ritual terms. Fela was seized, bound, and laid upon his stomach. The ribs were cut from his spine, the lungs drawn out and spread across his back in the shape of an eagle. Whether the act was literal or symbolic, the meaning was unmistakable. Fela's body became the altar, his suffering the sacrifice. The eagle, Odin's bird, the devourer of the fallen, was carved into flesh to honor the god who watched over battle and death. In this act, vengeance transcended revenge. It became devotion. This fusion of justice and worship was at the core of Viking belief. The Norse did not separate faith from action. To honor Odin was to embody his will. He was a god who hung himself upon the world tree, pierced by his own spear, sacrificing himself to himself for wisdom. Pain was sacred. Suffering was proof of strength. To inflict it upon one's enemies was to mirror the divine struggle. Thus, the Blood Eagle, however horrifying to modern sensibilities, may have been seen as a righteous offering, a ritual reenactment of the god's own endurance. Even the manner of its execution reflects the Norse obsession with honor. Some sagas suggest that the victim's courage determined the ritual's success. If the condemned endured the carving without crying out, his soul would ascend to Valhalla proving his bravery before Odin. But if he screamed, his shame would echo through eternity. The Blood Eagle was therefore not only vengeance for the victor, but a final trial for the condemned. A test of whether he could face death with the same stoic pride the Vikings prized above all else. It is easy to view such practices through the lens of cruelty, but to the Vikings, they were deeply moral acts. Violence was not meaningless. It was law, balance, and faith. The Blood Eagle was reserved for the worst offenders, betrayers, oath breakers, kings who defied the gods. It was both punishment and purification, a way to cleanse dishonor through pain. In a world ruled by blood feuds and divine justice, the ritual made sense. Modern scholars have come to see the Blood Eagle not as psychotic cruelty, but as cultural expression. It was a message as much as a murder, a declaration that no crime went unanswered, and no enemy escaped divine reckoning. The ritual's horror was its strength. It made vengeance unforgettable. When Ivar performed the Blood Eagle, whether by knife or by legend, he was not acting as a madman, but as a priest of retribution. His vengeance was art, his cruelty sanctified by faith. In his world, justice was not blind. It was soaked in blood. The gods demanded it. The people revered it, and history remembered it. And that is why, more than a millennium later, the Blood Eagle still holds us in its grasp, not as the madness of monsters, but as the terrifying logic of men who believed that pain could purify the soul. In the Viking world, power was not merely held, it was displayed. A chieftain's strength was measured not only by his victories, but by his ability to inspire awe and dread. The Blood Eagle, whether performed often or only whispered about, became the ultimate symbol of that power. A ritual so fearsome that its mere mention could paralyze enemies and solidify a ruler's authority. It was spectacle and message, horror and theology woven into one act. To rule in the North was to rule through fear, and nothing broadcast dominance like the threat of a God-sanctioned death. Viking warfare was built as much on intimidation as on battle. Raids depended on terror. Monasteries burned, villages pillaged, enemies broken before the fight began. The sagas reveal that Vikings understood fear as a weapon of strategy. Stories of the Blood Eagle spread across lands they invaded, England, Ireland, and the coasts of Francia, painting the Norse not merely as warriors but as agents of divine wrath. To hear that one's king or kinsman had been carved like an eagle was to believe that even the gods favored Viking vengeance, whether every detail of the ritual was literal or not mattered little. What mattered was belief. By the time of Ragnar's sons, the Blood Eagle had become a myth of terror, as potent as any army. It communicated to all who opposed them that defiance would not merely bring death. It would bring unending shame, the annihilation of body and spirit. The axe stripped its victim of humanity, reducing him to an offering, a symbol, Fela's supposed execution beneath the blade, or blade, axe of Ivar the Boneless, was less about punishment and more about propaganda. His mutilated body would have spoken louder than any messenger. This is what happens to those who defy the blood of Ragnar. This is what happens when you offend the gods of the North. The sagas suggest that such displays were often public, witnessed by followers and warriors. The Blood Eagle, performed in the open, served to unify the onlookers under a shared awe. It reminded them that their chieftain acted with divine mandate, that his vengeance was Odin's vengeance. In an age when law was written in runes and enforced by swords, spectacle was governance. The ritual was not simply cruelty, it was communication. It told the world who ruled, and at what cost. Even the eagle itself carried powerful symbolism. To the Norse, the eagle was the bird of Odin, the devourer of the slain, soaring over battlefields and feasting on corpses. To carve the shape of an eagle into a man's back was to make him a living sacrifice. his flesh transformed into a sign of divine judgment. His agony was the voice of the gods made audible. Such imagery spoke to the Viking psyche, which viewed suffering not as meaningless pain but as a bridge between worlds. Blood-bound men to gods and terror-bound men to obedience. The effectiveness of such symbols cannot be overstated. In the Viking Age, where literacy was rare and rumor spread faster than armies, stories held power greater than iron. Tales of the Blood Eagle would travel on the tongues of survivors, monks, and merchants. Each retelling exaggerated its horror, amplifying its reach. Even if only a handful of such executions ever occurred, the myth alone could achieve what endless battles could not: submission through fear. To an enemy, the prospect of capture by Vikings was dreadful enough. The possibility of becoming an eagle ensured that resistance often died before the sword was drawn. In this way, the Blood Eagle functioned much like the guillotine centuries later, a tool of authority as much as punishment. Where the guillotine symbolized the cold efficiency of revolution, the Blood Eagle embodied the divine terror of rule by faith and force. Both transformed death into political theater. But the Viking version was more primal, more spiritual. It was a covenant between power and the gods, sealed in blood. Archaeological and literary evidence together suggests that even if the Blood Eagle was rarely performed, it achieved what all great rituals do. It transcended its own occurrence. Its legend outlived its witnesses, ensuring that Viking rulers would be feared long after their ships had vanished beyond the horizon. The ritual became an extension of authority, one that required no repetition to remain effective. To rule through mercy might win love, but to rule through the promise of the Blood Eagle guaranteed obedience. In Viking lands, terror was not the enemy of power, it was its foundation. And the eagle, wings of bone and lungs of breathless agony, became the banner of that truth. Even after 1,000 years, the Blood Eagle refuses to rest. It lingers between the worlds of history and legend, half ritual, half rumor, a memory that neither scholars nor storytellers can fully claim. It is one of those rare stories that feels too vivid to be false, yet too horrifying to be true. The sagas preserved it as fact. Later historians dismissed it as fantasy. And now modern research finds it somewhere in between. Perhaps that uncertainty is what gives the Blood Eagle its enduring power. It is not merely a tale of violence. It is a mirror, reflecting both the Vikings' world and our fascination with their darkness. In the medieval Icelandic sagas, the Blood Eagle appears with the calm inevitability of truth. The writers never question its possibility, they simply record it as they would any other act of vengeance or worship. For them, it was part of a moral universe where pain had purpose. Yet these texts were composed long after the events they describe, by Christian scribes whose understanding of their pagan ancestors was filtered through both reverence and horror. To them, the ritual was both fascinating and condemning, a perfect symbol of the pagan savagery their new faith had supposedly conquered. That tension, the awe of the old world meeting the judgment of the new, may be what kept the Blood Eagle alive in memory, long after its axes had rusted. Modern historians once dismissed the saga accounts as metaphor. They saw in them a poetic way of describing vengeance, carving the eagle on a man's back as a figure of speech for brutal defeat. But the more closely the sagas are read, the harder that interpretation becomes. The details are too specific, the language too consistent across sources. They describe a procedure, not an image. When scholars and anatomists revisited the texts in the 21st century, they found to their unease that the descriptions aligned perfectly with known Viking weaponry and anatomy. It could be done. And if it could be done, then perhaps at least once, it was archaeological finds have added another layer of ambiguity. skeletons bearing deep incisions along the spine, ribs forcibly removed, and signs of post-mortem manipulation suggest that ritual mutilation was indeed practiced. Whether these cases represent the blood eagle itself or other forms of sacrifice remains uncertain, but they reveal a truth deeper than any single act, that the Vikings ritualized violence with a precision that fused theology and terror. Their rituals were not random. They were codified, intentional, sacred. The blood eagle fits that pattern too perfectly to be dismissed as mere myth. Yet the fascination it holds today is not rooted only in its possible reality, but in what it represents. The blood eagle stands at the crossroads of faith, fear, and power. It encapsulates a culture that saw death not as an ending, but as a transformation, a passage to the realm of gods and ancestors. In that worldview, the body was both vessel and message. To carve it open was to communicate with higher powers. Whether the ritual was ever performed exactly as the sagas describe is almost irrelevant. The idea of it was enough to shape behavior, belief, and legacy. In the centuries after the Viking Age, Christian chroniclers retold the blood eagle story with both horror and fascination. To them, it proved the righteousness of Christianity. The old gods were cruel, their followers monstrous, but even as they condemned it, they could not look away. The ritual fascinated precisely because it straddled that thin line between religion and atrocity, devotion and madness. The same tension that compelled the Vikings to perform it compelled later generations to retell it. And so the blood eagle survived, not only in sagas, but in art, literature, and imagination. It appears in medieval chronicles, in 19th century romantic poetry, in modern film and television, each retelling reshaping it to fit new fears and new fascinations. Its endurance is a testament to the human obsession with the edge of faith and violence, with the point where belief justifies the unimaginable. In the end, the truth of the blood eagle may never be fully known. Perhaps it was a rare ritual performed only once, exaggerated into legend. Perhaps it was more symbolic than physical, a performance of vengeance that grew bloodier in the telling. Or perhaps, somewhere in the long dark of the Viking Age, a prisoner really did feel the air against his lungs as his back opened to the gods. The ambiguity is the source of its power. The blood eagle endures not because we are sure of it, but because we are not. It belongs to that haunted space between fact and faith, where history breathes through myth. Whether real or imagined, it tells us what kind of world the Vikings lived in, and what kind of world we still carry in our fascination with them. The ritual may be gone, but its wings are still spread across time, dark and terrible, casting their shadow on our understanding of what it means to believe, to avenge, and to remember.